Stas Margaronis is on with the American Journal of Transportation. And Stas, I want to welcome you to the show, sir. Monday, welcome.
Welcome to you. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Tell folks a little bit about you and what you do. Welcome back.
Mark, I am the California and actually the West Coast ports reporter for the American Journal of Transportation. I cover the ports of Los Angeles, Long Beach, Oakland. We just had a reopening of terminal operations at the Port of Portland, which is good news. And I also get up to Seattle and Tacoma every once in a while. So my focus is mostly on maritime issues, but that also relates to trucking, terminal operations, shipping, emissions, and everything in between.
My golly. Okay, Port of Oakland resuming ops. What was that about? Shutting down for a little bit?
No, that was the Port of Portland. They had a dispute with the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, and the dispute was over 2 jobs, Mark. And the union waged a slowdown. The company, the terminal operator, shut down operations in 2017. The state and a representative named Shelley Davis helped put together a coalition. And Shelley is a businesswoman who's an exporter from the state of Oregon. She put together a coalition and helped get the business community to support efforts by the state to reopen terminal operations at the Port of Portland. And they announced that opening last week on January 7th. So the union was one of the issues. Shelley met with the head of the union, the ILWU. They said that they were not going to be the same people that they were 15 years ago, and they've been supportive of the effort. They have a new carrier, a Korean carrier has started. They're looking to bring in MSC, which is one of the biggest container carriers. But they have an operation. It has restarted. It's a big deal, Mark, for exporters, agricultural exporters from eastern Oregon now can access the port either through trucking or through the Columbia River barge system, which is going to reopen according to the port, and that will provide both trucking and barge operations to Portland. And they will be shipping their export products to Asia, and I will also open the potential for imports into Portland that will be distributed to Oregon and Washington.
I can imagine, Stas, a lot of that might be, or part of that might be agriculture. We've interviewed folks from the Soy Transportation Coalition, and one of their goals, I mean, they use the Mississippi barge traffic as one of their main avenues to distribute their products, but the Port of Oakland, West Coast ports are very critical to them as far as moving their product to, say, countries like Asia, soybeans.
Yes.
As an example. So this good news as far as the ag side is concerned.
Absolutely. So it's very good because it's going to... What was happening, Mark, was that the ag exporters in Oregon and in eastern Washington had been using barge traffic to access the Port of Portland. When the Port of Portland shut down in 2017, they had to truck to Seattle and Tacoma, greater distance, bigger product, bigger challenge. Now, you mentioned the issue of soybeans. We are very concerned about the soybean situation because the effect of the Trump administration's tariffs on soybeans had been to discourage sales. Now, you may recall the president met with President Xi, and China had agreed to restart its soybean purchases from the United States. So that's good news. But the problem is that things are really down from where they were. And there was an article, a report by Reuters a couple of days ago saying that there is a severe depression going on amongst soybean farmers because of the cutbacks in sales to China. And there have been some foreclosures. The banks have been resistant to making sales. Tractor sales are down. The Trump administration has offered a bailout for farmers that have been impacted. But the problem, as you know, Mark, is bankers don't like lending on bailouts. They want a certain business and a certainty, and that is a problem. Now, one thing I just want to point out, we're going to talk about the Port of Long Beach in a second. The new port director, Noel Hasagaba, spoke at the Port of Long Beach State of the Port for 2026 yesterday in Long Beach, and he had this thing to say about soybeans. America produces 28% of the world's soybeans, and it's a commodity in high demand in Asia where it is used in so many dishes. In 2024, China was the Port of Long Beach's number 3 destination for soybean exports with more than 13,000 TEUs, that's 20-foot equivalent container units. However, last year, 2025, the port only shipped 665. So they went from 13,000 to 665 TEUs of soybean exports, representing a 95% decline from the prior year. As trade policies shifted, China started sourcing more soybeans from other countries like Brazil. So that's a big problem that we have with these tariffs, Mark, is that we get blowback.
Yeah, and it's going to take a long time, I've got to imagine, before they find some kind of an equilibrium on the soybean side to move through these ports. Correct in that? I mean, from
yes.
that big of a trade, that big of a gap, that's not like an overnight turn on the light switch thing.
No,
correct?
No.
Are we thinking months or years before return to normal scenario?
So you're absolutely right, Mark. And as I mentioned with the Reuters report, the banks are leery about extending loans in the industry because of this cutback in loss of exports. So that's going to be very difficult to rebuild on. And as Noel pointed out, Brazil is now the big producer. It produces 40% of the world's soybeans. So when we play these games with tariffs, there are sometimes some very negative results, and those are going to impact all of our soybean exporters and farmers in the United States.
Where do you see maybe the sale of the equipment on the agricultural side? I'm thinking John Deere, maybe some of that is going to be exported through the ports. Maybe kind of a lackluster year for John Deere. Do you get any feedback from the port side about those kind of numbers there? They are a behemoth on the supply chain. Any thoughts on that?
Well, you know, I think the problem, Mark, that we have is that we saw a major cutback in sales in the United States to soybean farmers. And in fact, one of the interesting, not very fun stories in the report is that because of the cutback in exports, farmers were not buying new tractors. So there has been a decline in the United States in the sale of tractors. I don't know what's going on abroad, but I do know that we're starting to see a pullback here in the United States. And one of the really scary parts of this, Mark, is that one of the reports is that there was an increase in use of older tractors, and it was generating fires because of the older tractors apparently misfiring, so to speak, causing tractor fires. So that's not really good news for us.
Yeah. All right, let's do this, Stas. We're going to break. Stas Margaronis on the American Journal of Transportation. My golly, they don't need that.
No.
Stay tuned. We got more coming up right around the corner. Port of Long Beach. We're going to get into that next on this MLK Day. I'm Mark Phillips on Sirius XM 146. It's Monday. Thank you for joining us. And, just to reiterate just a minute ago, I mentioned that pretty much a lot of the federal stuff closed down for today. No mail delivery. No banks are in operation. In other words, inspections, truck inspections, that's going on as usual. There's no stopping there. Hey, we're talking with the best when it comes to reporting on the ports. Stas Margaronis is on with the AJOT, American Journal of Transportation. Thank you, good sir. I do want to send folks to your website and read up on your great work. Where can I go?
Thank you very much, Mark. You can reach us at www.ajot.com. That's www.ajot.com.
Okay, very good, sir. Thank you very much for joining me on the program. I was reading a story about the new chief executive officer that you mentioned at the Port of Long Beach. And, looking at this, the new executive director coming in, he's got some really great numbers here. The port had its busiest year ever, moving 9.9 million container units, partly driven by that front loading of cargo by the importers waiting to get ahead of the new tariffs. Port of Los Angeles handled 10.2 million units last year. And didn't he have a press conference last week, as a matter of fact, to talk about plans for the Port of Long Beach?
Okay, Mark, yesterday, Noel Hasagaba, the new Port of Long Beach CEO, held the State of the Port at Long Beach, and he discussed the plans for the Port of Long Beach and the state of the port as it is. As you referenced, the port had its best year with 9.9 million TEUs, so they're very pleased about that. However, Noel went on to say, and I'm quoting him here, now I don't want to minimize the impact of the tariff uncertainty. Certain segments in the supply chain felt the impacts more than others, and he cited our truck drayage operators as being one of them. Tariffs also impacted our exporters. China's retaliatory tariffs, which we just discussed, led to a decrease in U.S. exports across most agricultural commodities. Now, Noel Hasagaba worked for a long time in several assistant roles. He was the deputy executive director. He is still a very young guy. He's very energetic. And he is part of a rock band called the TEUs, which is a local...
That's great.
It's a local Long Beach rock band. And they had at the beginning, Mark, they had a music video of the TEUs playing one of their songs. And Noel gets out of the car in sunglasses, tie and jacket, and whips out a gold guitar. And he actually played he strummed the gold guitar just as he got started with a speech yesterday. So,
how fun is that?
Absolutely.
That's got to be really cool.
Absolutely.
That kind of energy, I think, is really going to, transcend the whole organization. Correct in that new approach, new ideas coming in. That's got to be, I think, one of the most important things is to energize the port system based on that great way to make an entrance, right? What do you see there?
Mark, I absolutely agree. And I've argued for a long time, we need younger people in the industry. And Noel is a symbol of that younger blood and younger energy. I think it is going to be a very promising tenure there. Noel is also very active in the American Association of Port Authorities, and he's been very active there promoting younger port executives and encouraging younger people to go into the port business.
And the Port of Los Angeles, not too far from there. Looking at some numbers, Port of LA handled 10.2 million units last year, the third most on record, topped the national rankings of the busiest ports for the 23rd year in a row. I got to think of this that, many people may think, well, the Port of LA and the Port of Long Beach kind of work collaboratively together. Do they, or are they two separate entities competing for the same freight? What do you see there?
Okay, Mark. So this is a bit of a sensitive subject. We have a kind of, there is collaboration on environmental issues. There's a clean air action plan that both the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach work together on. And Eugene Soroka, has the executive director at the Port of Los Angeles, has worked very closely with Noel's predecessor, Mario Cordero, and I'm sure he'll be working with Noel on shared projects. That includes a green shipping corridor that actually Noel mentioned in his speech. And that green shipping corridor is a collaboration with several ports in Asia to develop shipping that uses low emission fuel like low emission fuel like LNG and methanol. And actually, Noel said that he was very pleased with the progress that had been made. He said, and I'm quoting here, "I'm very pleased to report the progress that we have achieved with our green shipping corridors, and shipping lines like COSCO, CMA, CGM, Evergreen, Maersk, and ONE, among others, are already investing in new vessels." And Noel also said that one of the container terminals, Long Beach Container Terminal, he said he was very pleased to announce that COSCO Shipping has deployed a regular methanol-capable service to our Long Beach Container Terminal, signaling the growing demand for alternative marine fuels, and Pier A and C also offer LNG bunkering. Methanol is a low-emission fuel, Mark. It's not zero emission, but it is a fuel that has been embraced by a number of carriers who are seeking to get their emissions down from standard bunker fuel, which is a oil tar derivative. So the movement is there. Noel also embraced the International Maritime Organization efforts to get to zero emissions by 2050. That effort was opposed by the Trump administration last year, but the prospects are that overall everybody, even the United States, is eventually going to have to move into a zero emission direction for all the reasons that we've argued about but know about. But in any case, Noel was very vocal on the green port issues, and he also talked about a green trucking corridor. And he cited one drayage company, 4Gen Logistics. 4Gen Logistics, he said, met its commitments to become 100% zero-emission drayage truck company, making 4Gen the first drayage company in the nation with more than 75 trucks and a fully zero-emission fleet, and with most of that fleet charging and residing in our port. So there's good news out there. Go ahead.
It's good news and bad news, right? I mean, but from the standpoint of the fleets trying to obtain these emission standards that they're shooting for, is a lot of this California Air Resources Board driven.
Yes.
In other words, CARB has been talk about that. I know that CARB is trying to maybe move the trucking industry to zero emissions, more electric vehicles, that kind of a thing, and those mandates were shut down by the Trump administration. But it's the maritime side, the ports following the CARB rules to a large extent. What is CARB telling them?
Okay, Mark, that's very interesting that you mentioned this. In fact, there's been a joint effort with the South Coast Air Quality Management District that directly supervises the ports of LA and Long Beach. And a new cooperative agreement is going to slow down some of the impositions that really were an unfair burden on the trucking industry. And those included impacting the emissions of warehouses that are not really directly, they don't generate the emissions. Noel spoke to this, and what he said is the most significant partnership in support of cleaner air was adopted last November when the Long Beach and Los Angeles Harbor Commissions approved a cooperative agreement with the South Coast Air Quality Management District. They are the district that most directly impacts the localities. CARB plays an overseer role, but the districts do a lot of the implementation. He said this first of its kind agreement contains time-bound and enforceable commitments to develop zero-emission infrastructure at the nation's largest port complex. This cooperative agreement would not have been possible without the mayors of LA and Long Beach, as well as the Pacific Maritime Shipping Association and the International Longshore and Warehouse Union. So industry and the union played a big role in essentially slowing down some of the mandates, making them more practical. And also the trucking industry had argued that a lot of the trucks that a CARB and the management district wanted just are not in the market, and that it was unfair to try and push these mandates until the market is there. And this agreement gives everybody more time to develop those resources on a more reasonable level.
All right, very good. Absolutely. Yeah, that is some of the thoughts we have heard. The industry, trucking needs more time to get this going. But story, of course, to be continued. Stas Margaronis on with the American Journal of Transportation. Thank you, sir. One more time, where can folks find you? Safe travels. What's the best way of the web?
www.ajot.com, www.ajot.com. Mark, happy Martin Luther King's birthday, and thank you very much for your support and consideration.
Absolutely. Anytime. We will do this again. Stas, thank you very much. And drivers are going to wrap this up. Thank you very much for being out there and listening. I'm going to be back soon. I'm Mark Willis on Sirius XM 146.